Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku became the lone wolf part 1. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see part 2, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content and leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story Bulbasplat from 𝗧𝗵𝗲. So let's start the video. Runaway Raccoon's chapter text 𝗧𝗵𝗲 was worried. Izuku hadn't shown up for school for about a week. There wasn't any kind of reason said at her school. Izuku wasn't answering calls, and neither was Auntie 𝗏𝗏. The first thing she thought back to was when she told him to kill himself. Izuku had done it. He had gone through with it because she couldn't shut her mouth. Then she realized that it wasn't on the news and that she hadn't been arrested. About 70% of the population was women and had quirks, 20% was men, and the last 10% were a race called beastmen, a small population of beings that could transform into human-animal hybrids. Things to identify them quickly came up when uncomforted feelings about them rose so long ago. Being any way related to the death of a male was heavily punishable. It almost never matters what age you are due to the declining amount of them. So, after remembering that she was still fine, and that no one was talking about it, she decided to just try and keep it to the back of her mind. She couldn't. She was too worried. What if something had happened to both Izuku and Auntie 𝗏𝗏 and nobody knew? What if Izuku was lying in a pool of his own blood right now? Izuku sneezed out of an unfamiliar nose as he sat on the sofa, his mother gently stroking his tiny form. He had just suddenly turned into a beastman a week ago. A tanuki, if the lack of stripes around the mass of fluff acting as his tail was any indicator. Everything was over for him. Not only was his social life in shambles because he wanted to be a hero and was a man, most people still hated beastmen. Izuku himself never really hated them. He found the way that they evolved to be cool and possibly the first kind of quirks. Unfortunately, people didn't really share the same opinions. They thought of them as freaks of nature, even people that had animal quirks. Hypocrites. They might as well be beastmen too. Izuku quickly stopped that line of thought. He doesn't want to wish hated upon anyone. He just wanted to know what to do now. He made his way out of his mother hold because she had fallen asleep. He decided to go into the bathroom. His light brown furred face stared at him as he looked himself over in the mirror. His hands that had a much darker brown in them and claws twitched ever so slightly. Where can I go? He wondered aloud. He pulled up his phone. Tons of missed calls from 𝗏𝗏, probably trying to berate him for being a wimp who couldn't hand school, and Aunt Mitsuki's calls and texts, asking if both he and his mother were all right. Izuku let out a sigh and once again chose not to answer either of them. He went into his phone's search engine, looking up safe areas for beastmen. The top result was a place called Anima City. How the hell hadn't he heard about this? The place was a beastman-only city where he could live without fear and could learn about himself. His smile drooped a bit when he realized that it would be a bit hard to get there. But he didn't let that deter him. He was going to Anima City. He exited the bathroom and looked at his still sleeping mother. He was going to have to leave her behind. She wouldn't be accepted in Anima City. He let out a heavy sigh. Looks like he's leaving home early. 1 month later, a figure wearing a red cloak was using an ATM. She started to withdraw some money until she heard footsteps. She quickly canceled and hid out in the vent. Another figure, wearing an All Might hoodie, walked up the ATM to use it too. He looked to the side at the defiled poster of All Might and the beastman president shaking hands. The text saying, "Let's be friends." Jerks. They don't even want any trouble. Some of you look like them, he said, looking back at his transaction, putting away the cash. He looked at the vent. "Hey, are why you coming? The bus may leave soon," he asked the vent. Slowly, a figure in a red hood crawled out, watching the figure in the hoodie carefully. The hooded figure stuck out a hand up to her, a furred one. The red hood gasped. taking in the sight before bringing up her own hand, comparing it to her own. The hooded figure stared at her hand too. He pulled back his hood after making sure the hallways were empty. His half-green, half-yellow eyes, bushy green hair with his sides having black dips and black ears pushing through, and light-colored fur with a darker-colored mask around his eyes looked up at hers. She had blue hair, with the same black dips in the sides and black ears, half turquoise, half pink eyes, and the same fur pattern as his. The main difference between them was that she stood at 5 feet. Izuku had only met one other person at his 3-foot height, and she was still a bit taller. Are you a sea child? The female beastman asked. Izuku had to keep himself from falling over. He shook his head. I just have dwarfism, Izuku said with disappointment. Mikiru quickly realized her mistake before suggesting they catch the bus. They both managed to sit atop the roof silently and hung on as it took off. Once the wind started blowing and they were out of a public area, they removed their hoods again. For a while, it all seemed fine. They asked questions about each other. Izuku found out that she had been quirkless too, which he was excited about, and had some theories on how this had happened to the both of them. Like Izuku, Mikiru had spontaneously turned into a beastman, only she had been one for a year before deciding to come to Anima City. Hey Mikiru, can I swear? He asked his new friend. Yes, I give you permission to swear, Mikiru replied. Yes, go on. I'm afraid my mom's gonna show up, Izuku admitted, causing Mikiru to laugh. Inko lowered her head to look back at her picture of Izuku. If she could still sense him about to curse, then he was still alive, and that made her heart lighten. A moment of silence passed between the two as they watched Anima City across the water, looking beautiful in the sunset. Hey Izuku, wanna take a selfie? She looked to Izuku to see that he was visibly vibrating at this request, and that his eyes were tearing up. Nobody has ever asked me that. Yes, please, he said excitedly. They posed and took the selfie. Mikiru looked over it knowing she was going to cherish it. Then she noticed something wrong with Izuku's neck in the photo. Part of it was hid under his jacket, and the fur there seemed to grow thinner, and she could see a bit of skin. The skin even looked a bit malformed, like he was. Duck, Izuku said, tackling her down as a metal arrow whizzed past them. They looked back in fear. Women on bikes and in a van were chasing after the bus. Another arrow came at them. They jumped off the bus, tumbling against each other for a second before Mikiru's tail expanded to cover them both. They both got back on their feet for a second before they took off running, choosing to hop over the rail and tumble down the incline. Izuku quickly helped her up once they heard the vehicles come to a stop and started running. They continued to run until Izuku noticed the ground shifting in a straight line in front of them. Izuku quickly stopped himself and Mikiru as a metal bat tried to take a swing at them. You beastmen scum make me sick. But you're all dumb enough to come this way, so it makes patrol easier, a woman in a black hoodie said, tapping her bag against her open palm. The other two caught up and surrounded both Izuku and Mikiru. Izuku in his head felt incredible amounts of dread. And no, I was so close. I went through so much, it can't end here, he stated in his head, flexing his finger, readying to use his claws in a fight for the first time. One of the other women conjured up another metal arrow, her friend taking it in hand, sliding it into a hole onto her forearm. Izuku began thinking quickly. Okay, so the one making the arrows either can only make those arrows or can make other metal shapes, which I doubt because she can, because then she would have made bullets. The one launching them has a mutation that works like a gun on her arm, but she doesn't have her own ammunition. So if we can take those two out, we have a better chance against Bat Lady. She seems to have some kind of tunneling quirk maybe? Okay, I think we can do excuse me. Everyone looked towards the new voice. From the direction of the water, a lady was walking towards them. She had white dreadlocks that hung in the front, and was wearing green goggles on her head and a white coat. She had dark skin and an innocent look on her face. Could you guys please leave them alone? You see, I'm a volunteer who helps transport beastmen, and those two are my customers. So could you just— A metal arrow was launched at her, but she ducked incredibly fast. Hey, that's rude. You don't interrupt when someone is talking to you. She growled as her figure became more beastly. She had transformed into a mink. From the trees came two other beastmen, a boar and a jaguar. The hunters quickly tried to fight, but were stopped before they could really do anything, and were all knocked out. Mikiru and Izuku got up, brushing themselves off. They looked at the mink beastman. Hello there, I would be 𝗵𝗲𝗧𝗵𝗲, and I would like to help you. This is all I have here. Izuku cut her off without a stutter in his voice. He was holding out most of the money he had on him. He needed some so he could get food for Mikiru and himself. Didn't you hear me earlier? I'm a volunteer. No, you're the type that will do this for us as long as we pay. Mikiru said, rummaging in her tail for money. Marie just sighed. They figured her out quick. All right then, I'll just take whatever you have on you. Like your little friend here. Man, you two are so cynical, Marie stated. Izuku huffed as her hand came down to pet him. It didn't stop for a while. I'm not sure about him being cynical. He seems like he got by on looking like a baby. Mikiru commented with a snicker. If Izuku didn't have fur, they would have saw him blushing. Izuku woke to find himself snuggled in Mikiru's arms on the boat Marie was transporting them on. He opted for pretending he hadn't just opened his eyes in order to avoid embarrassment. Awa, did you just wake up? Well, too late. Mikiru probably thought he was weird now and didn't want to be friends. If you still want to cuddle, you're welcome to though. Izuku paused. Well, best not to look a gift horse in the mouth. You know, the way you did this was kinda weird. You looked pretty sleepy a bit after we got onto the boat, and then you just stomped over to me and aggressively sat at my lap. It was really cute, she said as she scratched his head. Izuku was once again glad he couldn't imitate a strawberry through his fur. Once they arrived and left the boat, they started heading down the road to what looked like a center. But where they expected tons of beastmen, there was no one. They looked around confused. Where was everyone? Their eyes wandered until they came over one building. There appeared to be some kind of glowing beast atop it. They stared at it for a second before hearing a howl and seeing red eyes framed by masks. Izuku and Mikiru felt a wave of discomfort, but didn't panic. The crowd closed in on them before throwing off their masks as fireworks went off and music started playing. Everyone started celebrating. It's a Beastman festival, Izuku exclaimed in glee. He and Mikiru moved through the crowds happy, trying new foods and drinks, meeting interesting people. They also had bumped into a pretty interesting person. Literally. Oh, Izuku whispered to himself. He wasn't paying attention due to his excitement and bumped into something. He looked up at the person. Scratch that, someone. He was a wolf, had a stern face, but he had a tear running down his face. I'm sorry, sir. I wasn't paying attention, Andy. The sound of happy beastmen. Cherish it for as long as you can. The wolf spoke. Izuku looked at him, confused. He heard Mikiru call him, and he looked back for a second, but the wolf had already disappeared. He paused for a second, confused, before heading over to his fellow tanuki. Izuku, you have to try this. It tastes amazing, Mikiru said, crouching down to offer him the drink. Izuku fought to not let this affect him. He took a sip to find that she was right. Hey, I thought you two gave me all your money? A familiar voice spoke. They looked behind themselves to find 𝗵𝗲𝗧𝗵𝗲 in her mink form. Izuku was the first to respond. We needed to get food, so we couldn't just give you all of it. Izuku rebuked, with Mikiru agreeing with him. As Mikiru and Marie continued to bicker with Izuku observing, a monkey beastman had decided to stick his hand into Mikiru's tail and come out with her wallet, sneaking away. Mikiru noticed. Hang on, wait, what? She checked her tail to find her wallet missing. Izuku and Mikiru turned around to find the monkey beastman sneaking off with her wallet. Izuku was secretly glad his hair was apparently thick enough to hold his wallet instead. "Hey, get back here!" she shouted as the monkey ran off. They quickly gave chase, bringing them to an area under a giant screen playing what looked like a movie. Unfortunately, they lost their culprit. Izuku's eyes quickly caught the other person there with them, a wolf with some kind of case with him. He glanced at the two before pulling his hat over his eyes and running off. Out of anger at having her wallet stolen, she kicked one of the supporting pillars of the screen. "Damn it!" she yelled. The area behind them exploded, the beams starting creaking as the two tanuki looked on with suspense. The giant screen started to tilt forward. Beastmen quickly started to run and clear out, Mikiru and Izuku about to do the same until they noticed an old goat who was unable to move quickly. "Mikiru, ahead of you," she responded as she picked up Izuku under one arm and started pushing the old goat with the other. "Come on, hurry up, old man," she said to the old goat as they moved at a speed walk's pace. It quickly moved up to a running pace with Izuku now helping to push. "Ogadogadogadogadogad," Izuku said as the falling screen got dangerously close to flattening them. Just as the screen was about to crush them, something swooped in and saved them from that fate. Mikiru and Izuku tumbled against the ground as something pushed them from under the now crashing screen. "Oh," was all Izuku could say as he laid on the ground in pain. Izuku looked up to see the guy that was crying earlier. "Why, you're the crying guy," Izuku said. "Wait, he's still crying." The wolf's gaze turned over to them. They were both grabbed by the hoods and pulled up near the wolf's head. "Was it you two who ruined the beastman's celebration?" he asked sternly, anger clear in his voice. What? And no," Izuku replied hastily. "All I did was kick a pillar," Mikiru argued. "What would it blow up from that?" the wolf asked with the same tone as before. "𝐻𝐵 wouldn't. There was another guy there." "A wolf," Izuku informed. "Another person?" The wolf dropped both of the tanuki. He looked forwards, sniffing the air. In his mind, ghastly figures of the sense of people appeared. The hazy image shifted. It showed the area and pillars where Izuku and Mikiru were, and there was the scent of the other wolf. But something caught the wolf about Izuku's scent. It smelled like smoke in certain areas and caramel. He put it to the back of his mind, focusing on the other wolf's scent again. Soon his nose picked up the trail of his path, right down an alley he was now facing. "It appears I've made a mistake. I'm sorry," the wolf man said, now much calmer. He quickly ran down the alley, leaving a trail of dust in his wake. "What the heck is up with that guy?" Mikiru said, dusting herself off. Izuku stood up too, looking at the path the wolf took. He wanted to help, but he wasn't ready to go back into explosions again. "Not yet." "Wait. Mikiru, your wallet," Izuku reminded. "You're right, let's go," she said, running off with Izuku. The wolf followed the scent trail. It got stronger as he got closer, until he stopped, right as a bomb went off in front of him. Izuku and Mikiru looked behind themselves at an alley away from them as it suddenly lit up. Izuku found himself pulling closer to Mikiru's side as it went off. "What happened?" Izuku asked. He followed Mikiru as she took off. His discomfort didn't matter. Someone could be hurt. "Tough luck, pal. That bomb is scentless," the bomber wolf said to the flaming rubble. "Even a beastman would notice it," he said cockily. His face turned to shock and fear as a hand reached out from the rubble and grabbed his leg. He was thrown into the air against a fire escape as his chaser rose from the rubble quickly. "That hurt," he said. His face turned into a snarl. "What is this guy? Is he a beastman with a quirk or something?" the bomber said in fear as he scrambled away. "Out with it. Why did you disrupt the festival?" the wolf demanded. The bomber ran up to the back of a van and knocked against it twice. Out from the doors burst a lion and a buck with weapons ready. They quickly unloaded bullets at their opponent, who simply crouched to the floor as the bullets missed. "What happened, 𝗧𝗏? Did you botch your trap?" the buck said, looking for their foe who had disappeared. "Careful with that wolf bastard. He survived one of my explosions," 𝗧𝗏 exclaimed. The wolf quickly made the assessment of them being pros. He tapped into his sense of smell again, able to sniff the scent of the human women they'd been hired by. A few of them had mutations, but there weren't any signs of quirk use to make these beastmen, so this that he could tell of. They were just traitors. "Humans," he growled out, his eyes filled with rage. He dropped down onto the roof of the van behind the beastmen. "You've all souls out to humans, willingly, haven't you?" he snarled. "How did you know?" the lion beastman yelled, aiming his gun. They all opened fire, but the wolf had disappeared again. "The stench of humans has already soaked into you," the wolf declared. "Well, you've got one hell of a nose," the buck shouted as he opened fire in the wolf, who just dodged the bullets and ran out of their path. "You've sold out to the anti-beastman faction." The wolf snarled as the lion beastman's gun ran out of ammo. "Don't you call me a sellout," he said as he started reloading. "It doesn't matter what job I take, human or beastman. I do it right," the lion continued. They all continued to unload bullets on the opposing wolf, who seemed to walk right past the bullets. "You call that a reason for spoiling a festival?" the wolf asked in anger. "Bullshit," he shouted as he ripped the buck's gun from his grip and grabbed the buck's head, raising him, flipping him, then smashing his head into the ground. The lion was quick to try and fire, but the wolf kept the gun aimed at the ground as he tried to shoot. "You'll pay for your crimes with your lives," the wolf stated. He punched the lion in the face before grabbing him by the collar and bringing him face down into the ground. 𝗧𝗏 quickly tried to pull a knife out to attack, but immediately was punted. Izuku with Miku in tow had just arrived where the explosion occurred, only to see the wolf that planted the bomb come crashing before them. "You scumbags who sold your beastmen souls to humans," the wolf started as Miku and Izuku looked over. The buck and the lion picked themselves out of the pavement and looked towards the wolf. "You're not even worth using these claws of mine on," he continued as he stood before the blaze of the alleyway. "My fists will be enough," he finished with a shout and a clenched fist. "Bring it on," the lion yelled, extending his own claws and tearing his own shirt off. Miku and Izuku covered their ears as the buck and the lion yelled. The lion lunged at the wolf, trying to run him into the ground, but the wolf stayed standing. He only slid back as the lion continued to try and push down on him before being stopped by running into a chunk of rubble. The buck tried to charge from behind, but the wolf dodged and caught the buck in the stomach and flipped him over. The wolf held down the buck's antler. "Let go," the buck commanded weakly. "Since you've lost your pride in being a beastman," the wolf started. The buck felt a sense of oncoming dread and pain. "You won't need your dear pride either," the wolf said as he broke off the buck's antlers, getting a scream of pain from the now hornless deer. "It's curtains for you now, cub," the lion said as he grabbed the wolf from behind. "You think I'm a cub, huh?" the wolf said in a growl. He then took the antlers still in hand and readjusted them, whipping them out to smack against the lion's face hard enough to break. The lion let go out of pain. The wolf flipped in the air and brought down his fist in the lion's head, putting him back into the ground again. An antler came flying down to stab the ground in front of Izuku and Miku, who were looking on. Suddenly, the bomber came up behind Miku and kicked her, then grabbed Izuku and pointed a gun at his face. "Don't move, either of you," the bomber commanded. The wolf looked back with a glare. "Make a move and this pup dies," the bomber yelled. Izuku was too scared to let this comment get to him. "Izuku," Miku called out in fear. "Who did you say would die?" the wolf said, now behind the bomber. much to his surprise and pain. The wolf smashed the bomber's head against the ground hard enough for him to bounce, and let the wolf hit him again. "Hey, cut it out, that's cruel," Miku said, getting up. The wolf kicked the bomber into his teammates, knocking them all out. The wolf stalked over to them. "That's enough. Why, you've already hurt them are really bad. Have some pity," Izuku called to the wolf. "Don't stop me. These bastards ruined the festival," the wolf stated. But they're still beastmen like you," Miku argued. "Why would you go this far? They've already had enough," Izuku asked. "These scum were hired by humans. They're a disgrace to all beastmen. It's what they deserve," the wolf stated, stepping on the bomber wolf. "Stop it," Izuku yelled at the wolf, stepping forwards. The wolf continued to press harder against the bomber's face. "We said to stop," both Miku and Izuku cried out as orange, yellow sparkles and blue sparkles started to radiate from their tails. Their tails grew to gigantic glowing masses that filled the alley they stood in. The wolf was pushed back by the giant glowing tails. The glowing stopped as the tails retracted to their original size, with both Miku and Izuku standing in front of the beaten beastmen. "That's enough. No one should be going this far," Izuku declared without a stutter. "Why beastmen fighting amongst themselves? Isn't this city a paradise for beastmen?" Miku asked them. "Wolf. That's why I do this," the wolf said, standing up straight. "Humans are the enemies of this city. Beastmen hired by them are the same as them. The human women are even worse," the wolf stated. That isn't true. And not all humans are like that," Izuku argued. "All humans, man or woman, are the same," the wolf stated. "They aren't," both Miku and Izuku said in sync. "We're humans too," they both declared. Izuku and Miku could clearly recall their lives. They are human, or at least they were. As much as it was hard to see, the wolf's face held disbelief. "When you two look like that?" he asked. Inko felt her blood go cold from a knock at the door. She wasn't expecting anyone, and she hadn't ordered any food, and no one knew Izuku had left. So who could be there? She quickly picked up the note Izuku had left behind and pocketed it. She walked up to the peephole and froze. It was Mitsuki and Katsumi. "They're here to check on Izuku." Inko quickly, but quietly, went back into her bedroom to try and wait it out. They were persistent. Persistent enough to let Katsumi blow the door handle loose. Inko quickly went to fake sleep. They entered her room. "Hey." Inko, "Sorry about the door." Inko shuffled a bit to make herself look disturbed by the noises. Mitsuki covered her mouth. "Well, Inko is off the table." Mitsuki was about to leave until she noticed something on the floor next to Inko. She picked it up and found writing on it, so she began reading. Katsumi sat on Izuku's bed feeling drained and hopeless. Izuku wasn't even here. Was he taken from Auntie Inko? Did she not tell anyone due to her grief? Would they ever see Izuku again? "Katsumi," her mother called, but barely in a yell. Katsumi just stomped out in a bad mood. She grabbed one of Izuku's notebooks, the one that was slightly burnt because it had her in it. The only sign that despite everything he still cared about her some. Her mother had shown her a note from Izuku. Auntie Inko was in grief, not because Izuku was taken or dead, but because he didn't feel safe. It was bad enough that he planned on going to a beastman city to be safe. It was all because of her, wasn't it? He was tormented by her when she should have protected him. She laughed as he got beat down and joined in just because he wanted to be a hero. She had even thought about taking the one thing he would never get back from him. The tears were now flowing down her face. In this situation, she couldn't do anything. Blowing up something doesn't work here. She especially couldn't just attack the beastmen. "What do we do?" Katsumi asked her mother. "We're humans. I was a human. He was a human. We were humans, Mikiru stated to the wolf as she stared at her paws. So, you two are tanuki, right? Wolf asked them. And no, we're raccoons. Why, yes, sir. Izuku answered truthfully. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 𝗔𝗂𝘁𝗵𝗲. We don't have stripes on our tails, we're tanuki. Izuku answered again. For some reason his mouth was feeling very spiteful. The wolf's ears twitched. He paused for a second. Follow me, he stated. 3 beastmen were left tied up in an alleyway with a paper taped to one of them saying, "These scum are the barbaric bombers." A police car pulled up to find them there. Across the rooftops a wolf and 2 tanuki ran. Well, one tanuki was giving the smaller one a piggyback ride. Excuse me. But where are WEF following YUT2? Izuku stopped when in place of the wolf was a plain-looking human man with off-white hair. Izuku and Mikiru just stared at him, with Izuku taking this opportunity to slip off Mikiru's back. How long will you keep that tail out? The 𝗵𝗃𝗃 asked them. Switch back to your human form already. He told them. There was the problem. They didn't know how. Well, Mikiru started, looking a bit sheepish with Izuku looking a bit ashamed at himself. You can't? The 𝗵𝗃𝗃 concluded. They nodded. The man actually looked surprised, and rightfully so. Switching between forms was like second nature to beastmen. He just began to walk off. I thought he'd be a lot older, Mikiru commented, starting off in his direction. Izuku gave her a brief loo before following. They looked over the streets, with a moderate amount of surprise. There was people. Obviously they were beastmen, but it looked like it was a street of people you'd see anywhere. What's wrong? The 𝗵𝗃𝗃 asked. Nobody is a beastman, Izuku said while pulling up his hood. He even felt a bit out of place here now. Of course not, the 𝗵𝗃𝗃 replied. But just now, Izuku and Mikiru tried to argue. That was for the festival. This is how things are normally, the 𝗵𝗃𝗃 stated. Mikiru looked visibly surprised at this, while Izuku just retreated farther into his hoodie. Mikiru let out a groan of despair. No way. I thought everyone was in beastman form here all the time. Mikiru whined. Izuku sheepishly nodded because he had similar views. The 𝗵𝗃𝗃 just huffed. Stop talking like a pair of humans, he commanded. We already told you. We are humans. Mikiru grumbled to herself as the 𝗵𝗃𝗃 walked again. They started their walk again, soon arrive at a building labeled Beastman Cooperative. This is the place, the 𝗵𝗃𝗃 told his tag-alongs. Izuku found himself watching a white strip that looked like a band-aid as it sat on his nose, with Mikiru in the same situation. A pale hand came and peeled off both strips, albeit very painfully due to the fur. A man with red hair, a mustache, and glasses looked at the strips in his hand. Yep, they're beastmen all right. The redhead spoke after looking at the strips for a few seconds. What? You can tell from that? Izuku asked curiously. The tests back in Japan were usually either done by people trying to rile up beastmen so they would transform, or through blood tests. The beastman marker test is a simple but effective way to tell, he said while showing that the strips that were once on the bridge of their noses were now blue. Without a doubt, you're both beastmen, the redhead concluded. I'm not, I'm a human, Mikiru said. Izuku partially agreed, sure before they were human, but now they're definitely beastmen. Could they even go back? The redhead just gave a hum at Mikiru's statement. I don't need to use the marker test to see that you two most likely a beastman. Although it's rare, there could have been the chance of this being a quirk, but most animal mutations aren't as close as this. The redhead spoke. The 𝗵𝗃𝗃 remembered something at the word of a quirk. Izuku smelled like smoke and caramel, and those scents were old, the freshest being on his neck. He made a note to investigate later. Mikiru pouted at the redhead's analysis. I swear I'm a human, Mikiru stated firmly. 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗄 𝗔𝐬𝐽 won't see convince 𝐴𝐴𝐵𝑑𝑢𝐻 have anything T to prove why you were human to 𝐻𝐻. Izuku stuttered out. Now that the adrenaline from the previous situation was gone, he felt really nervous. He didn't notice that Mikeru was now treating him like a frightened animal and was crouched to his level non-threateningly to listen to him. Mikeru thought about what Izuku suggested. I was human a year ago. Then I turned into this. Izuku was human a month ago and is now in the same situation. Her train of thought was interrupted for a moment. Impossible. Humans are humans. Beastmen are beastmen. It's been that way from the start. Nobody just changes. The blanket stated. What about quirked and quirkless? Suddenly tumbled out of Izuku's mouth in a low volume. Nobody seemed to notice, but the blanket who seemed to quiet at this statement. It must be a disease, Mikeru concluded, forgetting Izuku's earlier suggestion. A disease? The blanket questioned. Yes, a disease. A beastman disease. It even happened to Izuku suddenly a month ago, she said. Izuku then thought about something. Wait, a month ago, around that time didn't His thoughts were interrupted by Mikeru picking him up underneath his arms to punctuate what she was saying. There's other people like us here, right? You wouldn't lie to this face, would you? She asked, showing Izuku to the man so he could get a good look at Izuku's confused face. There's nobody like that, the blanket stated. Well, I haven't heard of anyone like that. The redhead spoke as he readjusted his glasses. Mikeru's face took on a downcast. She hugged Izuku to her body for comfort. Izuku didn't protest. Recently, others have an odd disease where they imagine they're human. Why don't you two see a doc? It's not that kind of disease, she shouted, almost about to throw Izuku at the poor man. Don't throw me. Don't throw me, not again, Izuku shouted in a panic. Mikeru collected herself enough to put the boy down. Jem, don't say things like that, a woman said. She had light brown hair and had a body that reminded Izuku of his mother. Oh well, that hurts, Izuku thought as he felt loneliness creep up on him. Show some sensitivity, would you? The lady said to the redhead, who was apparently named Jem. At least Izuku thinks he is. She looked at the two tanuki. I'm so sorry, your names are 𝐒𝐩𝐽 and Midoriya, right? She asked them. They quickly got up and gave a polite bow. Yes, I'm 𝐒𝐽𝐽 Mikeru. I'm Midoriya Izuku. I'm Melissa. He may not look it, but Jem here is the chairman of the Beastman Cooperative. It's our job to look after any newcomers. You and the little both need to register at the city hall tomorrow, so fill this out for him along with yours, she informed. Izuku fell forwards as he felt a barrage of imaginary bullets put holes in his confidence about his height. He's actually 14, ma'am, Mikeru said. Melissa sheepishly looked at Izuku, who was sitting curled up. I'm sorry, she said quickly. Mikeru handed Izuku his form as they both looked over them. Wait, we told you, we're not really beastmen. We can't register as beastmen, Mikeru exclaimed. Izuku held similar thoughts. After all, if he registered as a citizen here, could he still be allowed at UA? Mikeru quickly remembered Izuku's suggestion. My student ID, Mikeru exclaimed. Student ID? The blanket questioned. My student ID has my blood type and species on it, she explained to them. Izuku himself had pulled out his phone and was now scrolling through some photos for something. Brief glimpses of some photos that the blanket could see worried him, but he still couldn't make it out. So, since humans and beastmen have different blood types, it'll clear everything up so there are no mistakes, she remembered just then. Her wallet had been stolen. It was stolen with my wallet, she said defeatedly. Oh dear, well, what about you, young man? Melissa asked Izuku, who just found the photo he was looking for. I have this picture. But that's all. It was a picture of him the day he was born. He remembered he asked his mom for it when he asked to see some of his own baby photos. There was other people there too. His two grandmothers, Aunt Mitsuki holding Katsumi, Masaru, and his dad. He wasn't sure how well this would work as proof, although. That's pretty solid evidence already. Do you have anything else that would specify your blood type? For all we know, they all could be beastmen. Jem asked Izuku. He paused, then defeated shook his head. Then I'm afraid you two will just have to forget it for now, Melissa told them. You can't be serious, Mikuru whined, picking up Izuku like some kind of stress relief object. Anything stolen in Anima City can never be retrieved, Jem stated. Why don't you two get some sleep? Melissa suggested. You both look terribly exhausted. Both tanukis simply looked like shit. Izuku somehow just made it look cute with him. The tanukis followed Melissa to a room full of boxes towards the back, a shelf and a desk full of books. For today, you'll have to deal with just this for now, she told her guests. She laid out a single bed for them. The bed is clean, but looks like you'll have to share though, she stated. Izuku's fur bristled slightly. He would have to sleep on the floor one more time. It's plenty. We've been sleeping outside constantly, Mikuru reassured her. Melissa walked over to a door. If you need anything, ask Shiru in here. She opened it, and a black crow swooped out and revealed the blanket they met earlier. Izuku yelped as the crow came to sit on his head. Kuro. The blanket, now named Shiru, said. The crow departed and sat on Shiru's shoulder. We're leaving early tomorrow. Get some sleep, Shiru told the tanukis. He closed the door back. I know Shiru seems cold, but he's a nice person, Melissa reassured them. Izuku hoped so. He was scared of the way Shiru watched him. So his name is Shiru, Mikuru mumbled to herself. What? He didn't tell you? That's Shiru Ogami. He's out social worker, she told them. Tomorrow he'll take you two to City Hall, she informed. Ogami, both of them mumbled out in unison. They recalled the glowing wolf on the roof too from much earlier. We don't have a bathtub, but you'll be fine with a shower, right? Melissa asked them. Why, yeah/yes, they both replied. Thanks, Mom, Izuku accidentally shouted as she left. Melissa sputtered for a second. Izuku managed to show red through his fur, and for the first time had shoved someone out of a room. Later that night, Mikuru stared up at the ceiling. Izuku was exactly not the left of the bed. He gave up the bed to Mikuru, but she planned on pulling him in. This is way different from what I thought. She closed her eyes trying to get some rest. But then an image flashed through her mind. When they were still trying to get here, there was something wrong with Izuku's neck. She quietly removed herself from the bed, then picked up Izuku and laid him in it. Then she heard Shiru's door click open. She didn't know why, but she hid. He walked in, transformed into his beastman form, and was smelling something. His snout turned to Izuku as he bent down to his knees. I hope you aren't going to do what I think you are, Mikuru said from behind the door as she emerged from it. Shiru paused. I'm not, he said firmly. Mikuru waited for a second before she believed him. Good, because I'm worried too, she said, walking over to help. They managed to remove Izuku's All Might hoodie, and they saw his full neck. There was a burn, in the shape of a handprint. Mikuru gasped. Who would do this to anyone? Especially a guy. Shiru felt fury that he kept on the inside. He smelled human. He smelled a human woman in specific, and how she grabbed him by the neck and kept him against a wall as her hand started to make the smoke smell he was getting right now. He could even smell the panic Izuku was feeling when he got this, which was 1 month ago. They jumped back when Izuku rolled into his side. Then they realized they may have to check everywhere. Maybe not tonight, but one last one to see how served it's been. They carefully pulled the back of his shirt up. exposing a larger burn in between his shoulder blades. Now even Mikiru was pissed. There was probably more. But who would even do something like that to Izuku? She's only had him for a day, and she knows that he's probably one of the kindest people on earth. Izuku uttered one word in his sleep. His voice trembled in fear when he said it after Qiru accidentally touched his scar. 𝐒𝐩𝐽𝐽 please. He started to sweat. Mikiru knew who she wanted to maim. Izuku couldn't help but feel nervous as he sat next to Mikiru on the couch. She was being really quiet right now. He was afraid that he upset her somehow. Did he offend her? Maybe he shouldn't have come with her. He's just making things inconvenient. He picked up his cup of water and took a sip. He almost spit it out when Mikiru's hand suddenly started rubbing his back. Shit. Shit, 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 shit. She's going to notice. I should have brought something thicker to wear other than this t-shirt. At least I brought my neck warmer. I think that covers me well. Izuku thought as he felt himself start sweating. She was going to feel the different skin textures, even through his clothes. He didn't want to get Kaken in trouble. He waited for Mikiru to point out how his back felt. It never happened, but Izuku still worried, even after she started petting his head. Why did Mr. Qiru have to leave? I would rather be at City Hall right now. Izuku decided to try and get his mind off his current situation. He decided to try analyzing something, like he used to, or maybe try and analyze his own abilities. Wait. He remembered when he and Mikiru had stopped Qiru from killing those beastmen in that alley. Their tails, they started glowing, and then they grew. Even before that, when he and Mikiru had tumbled down the roadside, her tail grew then too. Was this some kind of shape shifting like tanukis did in those ancient stories? If that was true, then that would be a great ability to have for hero work. He could probably shape shift into a female version of himself and apply that way. He needed to find out now. He stood up, causing Mikiru to jump slightly. I am gonna go do things, he said as he slipped back into their temporary room. He placed himself down on the floor, cross-legged, ready to at least expand his tail. He quickly realized he didn't know how he even did it the first time. He just did it. There was no feeling whatsoever. He could just do it, which doesn't help him at all. Maybe just trying to imagine it would help. He sat there, the picture in his mind of his tail growing to the size of his own body. He could only hear the shifting of his fur, which was probably just his tail twitching. After sitting for a few minutes trying to focus on his tail, he gave up. He sighed at his current failure. Nothing seemed to be working. Maybe he should ask Mikiru about it. No, then she would think he's weird. Damn it, all he wanted to do was make his tail big. Unbeknownst to him, his tail was retracting to its original size behind him. The door opening drew his attention. He turned to find Mikiru there. Hey, I was thinking about going out for a bit. Wanna come? She asked, holding up his all-night hoodie to him. Izuku and Mikiru found themselves casually wandering about Anima City, taking in the sights and the people. It was a bit overwhelming for Izuku. He was seen as a person, not a defenseless puppy or a glass figurine, an actual person with thoughts and feelings. But people still thought he was Mikiru's younger brother or other things, which was a bit embarrassing for him. But it still felt wonderful to him. Mikiru felt her phone vibrate and quickly pulled it from her pocket. It was a message from Qiru. Oh, hey Izuku, Shiru's back from whatever he was doing, and he can take us to City Hall now. You coming? Mikiru told the boy as she was about to turn around. Izuku hesitated. He still wanted to look around more. It would be a good idea to learn more about his area and memorize it. Plus, it was exciting to be here. He sighed, about to turn around to join Mikiru, until she crouched down to him. Hey, Izuku, if you don't want to come, then it's okay. It's your choice, Mikiru told Izuku. Izuku felt himself pause. His choice. His choice. Back home, people that weren't his mother would always ask another girl what he wanted, when in public people would ask his mother and ignore him unless she said what he wanted. And Mikiru just told him he had his own choices. He felt tears start to gather in his eyes. Mikiru patted him on his head. "Izuku, things here are different. I'm your friend, not your boss. You can do whatever you like, as long as it isn't illegal," she clarified. Izuku slowly nodded, his teary-eyed whimpers of happiness escaping. He turned around, ready to do more exploring of Anima City. "I'll see **************************** later," he said, still crying. Mikiru's sweat dropped. She didn't want this to be something common with Izuku. As they went their separate ways, Izuku continued to see more of Anima City, keeping a list of the animal species he's seen, even adding subclasses and potential abilities inherited. There were lots of interesting people too, one of which he recognized, mainly because she was in front of him right now. "What happened to we don't know each other on the B boat," Izuku told Marie. It was getting a bit late and Mikiru may be back already waiting for him. Marie got closer. "Well, you're so cute. Who would want to say that they don't know you?" Marie said, rubbing his cheek. Izuku softly pushed away her hand. And you seem like the perfect person to help me out with something." Izuku's eyes narrowed. That sounded suspicious. "You're thinking I'm being suspicious right now, don't you?" Izuku nodded. "Well, stop that. I'm not about to ask you for anything illegal," she reassured. It didn't do much to calm Izuku. "All I'm asking for is a little help getting some beastmen over. Nothing bad, right? Don't you want to help people?" Izuku started sweating. How did she know that he couldn't stop himself from helping? Izuku eventually caved and agreed to help her. "Good. Now come on. We need to get to the boat," she said with glee. Izuku found himself aboard Marie's boat as the coast drew nearer. But the most confusing part was that Izuku was being carried by Marie on her back, and she refused to put him down. Izuku had looked up at Marie. "Hey, you know who you're transporting, right? You told me you got a specific order. Do you do that normally, or was finding us something like a routine check?" Izuku asked. "Routine check? It makes for great pay. But this time I got called to transport for a lot of cash," Marie answered casually. Izuku gave her a disappointed look. She couldn't see it, but she could feel it, so she just focused on steering. Did he just make me feel ashamed of what I do?" Her thoughts were interrupted by the land drawing nearer. Meanwhile, as they started to get off, Izuku had a realization. Wait. Who would have Marie's number? She tells people to forget they met, so she's obviously keeping things private. Furthermore, how would anyone outside of Anima City even have a chance to get her number? Once they had walked a bit further into the land, Izuku felt on edge. Where were they? It was too quiet. Even Marie seemed to be on edge. Something is wrong. Then what looked like bandages erupted from the trees above Izuku. As if he was piloted by another force, he was yanked out of the way. He looked back to see. Wait, that's Eraserhead. Yeah, wait, why is she here? Izuku tried not to panic. She had no way of knowing it was him. He had his hood up. Izuku Midoriya, I need you to come with me, I'm taking you home. Izuku's eyes widened under his hood. How did anyone find out? His mother wouldn't have sent out a search. He just knows it. So, who Auntie Mitsuki? Damn it, Auntie, he whispered under his breath as he dodged Eraserhead's signature capture scarf again. He makes a quick decision and asks a question. How do you know I'm Izuku Midoriya? He asks. Even though he shares some similarities to how he used to look, there's clear differences. His hair and eyes, for one. His hair was completely bush green instead of having its 5 o'clock shadow, and his eyes had 2 different colors. You couldn't even see his freckles anymore. But then again, his hoodie hid his face and had part of his hair sticking out, so you might not see the darker parts of his hair. Not only was I given a physical description, which you match almost perfectly already, but I was also given a voice sample. Look, Your aunt really wants you back safe with your mother, so why don't you stop making my job harder and come with me now?" the heroine said. She quickly made a lunge for Izuku that he wasn't prepared for, but Marie grabbed him first. She took the boy under her arm and ran into the trees. They could already tell the heroine was on their tails, but they tried to circle around to get closer to the boat, but made sure to avoid the clearings. Izuku was freaking out on the inside. How were they going to get away from Eraserhead of all people? Wait, if they can get enough distance from Eraserhead, maybe they can get to the boat and escape. "Marie, slow her down," he managed to whisper out to her. She seemed to hear it. She started to make turns and moves that required more Parker. While almost getting ensnared by the scarf, she even climbed up a tree. "Now you're just being irrational and cornering yourself. Dumb-ass male." Upon hearing her hushed words, Izuku felt heartbroken. He looked up to Eraserhead. He saw her as one of his role models because she basically fought quirkless. She was able to disable people's quirks by looking at them. As long as they weren't mutations, she gave him hope that he could be a hero. So, hearing that from one of the heroes he loved hurt him. She thought of him the same way that everyone else did. Marie took notice in how the boy seemed to slacken a bit after the heroine's words. She scoffed, finally shifting into beastman form and now leaping through the trees. "Damn it, get back here!" Marie traveled faster than the heroine, soon making it to the boat. She didn't even bother setting Izuku up correctly and just started the boat. As they pulled out from the shore, too far to jump, they saw Eraserhead, scowling. Izuku just looked back at her. Feeling nothing but sadness, he turned to Marie's leg and pulled his face into it. Mikiru looked at the roof of her room pissed. She hates beastmen. She hated them, she hates them, she hates them. Asterisk creek asterisk. She looked over to the doorway and saw Izuku. She immediately brightened up. "Hey, Izuku, why don't you?" Izuku ran into her and hugged her torso. She could feel his body quivering and could hear whimpers. What happened? Did someone hurt him? She gently stroked his head, trying to calm him down. It seemed to calm him down as his whimpers slowed and turned into hiccups. She tilted his face to hers. "Izuku, what happened?" she asked the boy, as she sat him to sit on his own. Izuku didn't respond. He felt like the reason he was crying was stupid. It didn't matter. She probably didn't even care. Yet he still told her. "So there's this you underground hero Eraserhead." Mikiru held Izuku close on her bed a few hours later. The fact that after Izuku had told her everything, and got scared that she would just tell him he was being stupid, and would have done something physical after saying that he wanted, just made her pissed. Who could have hurt someone as kind as Izuku so deeply? She didn't even know him that long, and she wanted to keep him safe. So why couldn't others just want to do the same? Was it this Kaken's fault he was like this? She growled and turned herself towards Izuku and held him tighter. There was just too much she was angry about right now. She let her mind drift to sleep. Katsumi sat in her room in despair. There was confirmation that Izuku was in Anima City, and by choice. He was seen with a beastman he willingly left with and showed familiarity to. She had been hoping that Anima City would have rejected him so he could be brought back home. But he found a way to stay. A way to stay away from her. All because she was an insensitive bitch who didn't know how to use her words the right way and just kept using her fists. The worst part was Auntie Inko. Even though she hasn't touched Izuku's room, she's starting to act like she's moved on. Like she was accepting that Izuku had left and could choose to never come back. She just wanted to be able to go over there and get him back. But then that would start problems for everyone, especially if she forced her at over there using explosions. She looked at her phone. All her messages to Izuku had gone unread. This was all her fault. What had she done? Izuku felt drained. He didn't expect it. But yesterday hit him pretty hard. He felt his position shift upwards as Mikiru sat up. She yawned as Jem continued his noise outside. "Good morning, Izuku," she said, trying to turn around to look at him. Izuku smiled from his position on her back and made a noise to let her know he heard her. They soon turned to the window, where they greeted Jem for the morning. "Hey, Mr. Jem, what's that big B building?" Izuku said, pointing to a tall building in the distance that has 4 protrusions pointing upwards. "Oh, that would be the Medicine. It's 𝗧𝗵𝗲 Medical Center, a research center and hospital run by 𝗧𝗵𝗲 Pharmaceutical," he explained to them. 𝗧𝗵𝗲, have I heard that name somewhere? Izuku wondered to himself. He leaned into head pat Mikiru was giving him. "Maybe they can help figure us out, Izuku," she said. Just then a door was open. They looked over to see Shiru. Then he picked up Izuku under his arm and dragged Mikiru by the collar. They could only make confused noises as he brought them out of their room, across the roof, and back into their temporary room. He threw Mikiru in and gently placed Izuku on her lap before exiting and closing the door, locking it. They took a second to process this. Wait till two's out," Izuku said, as he started pounding on the door. "Shiru, what are you doing?" she said, trying to bash the door open. The sounds of more things being piled against the door could be heard as they continued to yell for their freedom. "Shiru, come on, let us out," she shouted from behind the barricade. "Keep quiet," he told them. Mikiru's student ID was slid back under the door. Izuku was about to congratulate her on finding her wallet before remembering they were still locked in a room. "I realize you both may be human now," Shiru stated. Did you seriously lock us in 𝐎𝐩𝐫 because of that?" The disappointment in Izuku's voice was audible. You could even tell he was on the verge of tears. Shiru quickly stopped himself when he saw that he was about to move the objects used to barricade them. He recomposed himself before speaking. "And no, your existence is just dangerous." He heard Izuku make a whining noise and felt his heart twist into a knot. Don't giving. "Hey, what's that supposed to mean?" Mikiru shouted, currently trying to make Izuku feel better by hugging him. "What do you think would happen if humans found out they might turn into beastmen?" "A panic, one that could put beastmen in danger. Don't come out of there until we can learn more." "I'm sorry, but I'll bring your food to compensate," Shiru said. Izuku, however, still didn't like this. He didn't want to be trapped in this room. Even though Mikiru was here, it was basically prison. That D does N nothing to M make this be better. This is I insane. It's J just P prison F for I innocent P people W with the sin statement for the greater good attached, he cried behind the door. "Please, just trust me. I'll protect the peace for all beastmen," he said. "Being cool doesn't bring trust. I've already made that mistake." Izuku screamed at the wolf, causing him to flinch. He didn't expect to hear that distrust from the tanuki. Mikiru was stroking his head to calm him down. She knew Izuku was still sore from his experience, but she didn't expect to see them manifest in anger. Has she even seen him angry before? He mostly didn't seem capable of it. Izuku stomped over to the door. "Where's G going? To that hospital?" he said, straining as he pulled against the door. "No," Shiru stated flatly. Izuku then lost his grip on the door handle, causing him to fall on the floor and hit his head. "Oh, come on. Let us out," the small tanuki said, trying to pull the door open again. "No, and if you step a foot outside, I'll just kill you," he stated firmly. "Does our comfort mean nothing to you?" Mikiru said, trying to find a way to pry the door off. Izuku was now punching the door. They paused at the sound of something else being moved. "Wait, hey, don't put anything else," Mikiru yelled behind the door. "Rearranging furniture so early. It must be rough." A voice said behind Shiru. "The mayor," Shiru said. Izuku and Mikiru perked up, now leaning their ears against the door. Why was the mayor here? Did Shiru know her? A bombing? Again? 𝐬𝐽 questioned upon being told a second ago. Yes, again. The mayor simply responded. The director of 𝗧𝗵𝗲 Medical Center reported to the police that they'd received a threat. Then earlier this morning a truck carrying 𝗧𝗵𝗲 drugs was blown up. The mayor informed. Izuku and Miku were shocked by this. Another bombing, they thought, pressing closer to the door, Izuku wishing he could ask more questions. But if he tried to yell behind the door, that would make Mr. 𝗓𝗫 look suspicious in front of the mayor, and he didn't want to get him in trouble. Even if it was explained, it could cause Miku lowered a hand to Izuku's head without looking. Izuku found himself calming down. Everything's okay. Mr. 𝗓𝗫 threw them in here to try and help everyone in the first place. He should apologize for yelling. But if only he could hear more. Miku jumped as something long and fuzzy brushed against her torso. Izuku had rabbit ears. What the hell? If you've got money to build a hospital and buy cutting-edge devices for beastmen, then use it for humans. Those are the bomber's demands. The mayor spoke. Izuku's face tightened. He could tell those kinds of words didn't do well with 𝗓𝗫. Miku had heard the same thing due to her ears mimicking Izuku. Are those anti-beastmen scum up to this again? 𝗓𝗫 asked. His voice remaining calm, but had aggression in it. The police tried to trace the scent of the bomb, but the explosion erased it. They weren't able to find any leads either. That quirk-like sense of smell of yours would help us out a lot, more than the police investigators could. Please, find the bomb. She requested to 𝗓𝗫. He lowered his head a bit. There are patients in the medicine. There's no time to lose, he said with a look of determination. If the hospital's blown up, our disease may never get cured. She felt a look of disappointment at her back and looked to see Izuku being to the one to give it. And people could be hurt. No one should be blown up. Miku felt a spike of rage go through her as she watched Izuku shake in fear for a second at the word blown up. Definitely Kaken's fault, and another reason to kick her ass. She saw Izuku's face look conflicted. Hey, what's wrong? She asked him. Well, Mr. 𝗧𝗫 sounded so cool, and it makes me trust him, he admitted, looking sheepish, his face actually taking on characteristics of a sheep. You didn't learn that lesson at all, she deadpanned. Miku then realized that to prevent the loss of a hospital, she needs to get out of here first. She took in a deep breath. Izuku quickly caught on. Wait, Miku, and no. Help us, Mayor, she shouted to Izuku dismay. He tried to tackle her, but she just caught and was now holding him up. Miku, think about how this makes Mr. 𝗧𝗫 look, he yelled at her. She would have responded if she wasn't so caught on the fact that Izuku basically just jumped into her arms without hesitation. Bah, was all she could really say. Suddenly the door opened. Mayor, this man tried to kidnap me and my little baby, Miku said, pointing a finger at 𝗓𝗫 while holding Izuku. Izuku was currently freaking out because 1. This was the exact kind of situation Izuku wanted to avoid, and Miku was expressly furthering it along, and 2. Miku had his head against her chest, so it's just Allah, but on the outside. His face could only portray a smile that hid tons of panic behind it. Hey, was the only thing 𝗓𝗫 got out before being interrupted. He said he'd kill us if we left. He's also a blackmailer. It was to protect you two and all beastmen, 𝗓𝗫 argued. Izuku just made noises. One of them sounded like way. Miku just growled at 𝗓𝗫. So you two must be 𝐒𝐩𝗵𝗲 Miku and Midoriya Izuku, the mayor said to the tanukis. Izuku's brain rebooted at the call of his name as he turned as well as he could to face the mayor. Just by looking at you two, I can see you're obviously beastmen. It's hard to believe that you were once human, she stated. You knew about her? 𝗓𝗫 questioned. I need to know everything about Anima City. That's the job of a mayor, she concluded. I see. It was Grandma, Qiru deduced. Izuku looked at Mikiru at the mention of the name. She gave him a look that meant, tell you later. Well, Mikiru interrupted. Please, let us help find the bomb. Izuku quickly jumped in. He left Mikiru's arms to speak. Why? The mayor asked. If the bomb wasn't found in time, people could get hurt. There's people who need that kind of technology here, and that would hurt them too. Mikiru wants to find out how she turned into a beastman. And I kinda do too, so please let us help. Izuku said, bowing in front of the mayor. Mikiru couldn't help feel proud of Izuku's reasons and his clear speech that was free of stutters. I don't think it's safe to let them both out. If anti-beastman humans found out about them, who knows what reactions they'll have, Qiru stated. I'm not sitting still, Mikiru declared. Qiru looked at her surprised. Before I got here, I sat around holding my breath. I was just cooped up in my room. After I ran off, I had to avoid beastman hunters and nearly got caught in a few villain attacks just to make it to this city. But now I have to hide again. I'm not doing that, she spoke. Now you listen here, Qiru said in a low voice. Mikiru just had a determined glare. Izuku felt inspired by Mikiru. She's told him these things before, but seeing her will and her determination always made him feel this way. There wasn't anything that happened to him that was that bad. Kaken. We're short-handed. Let them help us, the mayor said with finality. The three looked over to her. Izuku actually did not expect to be allowed. He was fully prepared to just sneak there if he had to. They can communicate for Kuro, and one of them can look around and analyze what they can, the mayor said, pulling out a notebook from her clothes. Izuku checked his hair, then his tail. Wait, how did she communicate for Kuro? Mikiru asked, confused to what she meant. Just looking at the two of them wouldn't be able to tell they were human once. Going around Anima City shouldn't be a problem. However, keep that fact you were once human a secret, she instructed. Izuku and Mikiru nodded. I understand, Izuku answered. Also, can you forget about being kidnapped and threatened? Yes, Izuku answered way too enthusiastically. He was all for not getting Mr. Qiru in trouble. Izuku gave her a pleading look. She sighed. Fine. But only because he would get upset otherwise. She agreed as well. Then have these in exchange for your old phones, she said, holding out white smartphones. Mikiru took one, inspecting it, while pulling out her old one. She was about to question why the mayor needed her old phone, but then remembered how one time there was a villain with a technopathy quirk that spied on people and took personal information through certain types of phones. While in prison, her quirk mysteriously stopped working, as if it was just gone. But Izuku, he decided to lie. Thanks for the new phone. I lost my old one during something unpleasant. But thank you for the new one, he said, bowing. He still had his phone. He just didn't want to get rid of it, because it was the only way he could talk to his mother, and at least look at Kaken's message notifications. One of the more recent ones saying "come back now" caused him to feel the need to block her and turn off all location settings he could. If Kuro finds anything, contact Ogami, the mayor told the Tanukis. She held a small object in her hand out to Qiru. This is a fragment of the bomb found at the scene. Qiru moved over to her, taking the fragment from her hand. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 Pharmaceutical is part of the 𝗧𝗵𝗲 conglomerate, a prominent Weathley family. They support what the mayor says about equal rights for beastmen and humans alike. They also provide massive funding for Anima City. Lost of humans can't stand that. But there are rumors that 𝗧𝗵𝗲 Pharmaceutical is profiting from beastmen data. Not all beastmen are happy to have them around, Qiru informed them as they looked at the oddly shaped building in the distance. Just the equal rights for humans thing is still struggling to be done, she grumbled, ruffling Izuku's hair. Izuku was quickly to change subject. Then why did you accept this job, Mr. Shiru? HM? I thought you only wanted to help beastmen. Izuku elaborated. I can't refuse the mayor, he responded. He emptied a small pouch onto his palm, metal fragments falling out. Shiru's transformed nose sniffed the scent of the pieces. He could smell something similar in another part of the city. Actually, multiple things in different parts of the city, 6 to be exact. He quickly pulled out his phone. Agami here. I've located the bombs. There are 6 in total. Send the bomb squad. He spoke to the police on the other side. He whispered to Kuro. You go to Medicine. There's one at the Medicine? Miku asked, concerned. No, there isn't any scent of a bomb. This is just to be safe. The bomber's real target is 𝐬𝐵𝗧𝗏 after all, he said, walking down the steps of the roof. Mr. Shiru, wait, we're coming too, Izuku said, quickly grabbing Mikiru's hand and pulling her along. Izuku from Mikiru's shoulders watched Kuro's path to the Medicine, their only guide. Soon they stood before it, looking up at the tall building that had been threatened. Hearing the sound of a vehicle, they saw a truck loaded with something pulling in. The gate opened for it almost immediately. They watched as Kuro perched atop the truck caught a ride in before they quickly tailed it, ducking down so the security officer who wasn't paying attention wouldn't see them. Come on, hurry it up. Oh, relax. The cops are too busy dealing with the bomb threat. The commotion came from a group of thugs uncovering something to what looked like a worker at the Medicine. At any rate, this is the last time, the scientist spoke, although it didn't exactly sound like a solid command. Gosh, why so cold? You've profited plenty from this as well, you know. A thug in a blue suit with a crescent moon on the collar casually said, not worried at all. Unbeknownst to them, 2 tanukis had just snuck up behind the truck and were now eavesdropping. Profited? Are these guys selling something? What could the Medicine need from guys who look like that? Izuku wondered, not noticing that once again, he and Mikiru's ears had lengthened to a rabbit's once again. The blue-clad thug sniffed the air. Something smelled wrong, like a rabbit. They didn't have any bunnies among them tough. He turned his head to the source, seeing just a bit of a black and red shoe from behind the truck. Hey, who's behind there? Come out, he barked. Izuku quickly shifted away from the edge with Mikiru. Shit, they found out. Izuku quickly pointed to the other side of the truck for Mikiru to hide. She quickly complied under the impression Izuku would follow. The thugs shifted into their beast forms as the once again ordered the perpetrators to come out. Izuku nervously stepped out from behind the truck, hoping his childlike appearance would drop their suspicions. He's even a cute bunny right now. They wouldn't hurt him, right? Izuku gave a sheepish smile, his hair unnoticeably becoming fluffier like a sheep. The thug gave a sweet smile back. Bring that little bunny to me, he then said in a threatening tone. Izuku yelped as they ran after him. As he ran away from the truck, he could see Mikiru's panicked face, pleading for him to come to her, where it's safe. But he couldn't bring these guys to her, she could get hurt. He saw us. He could have heard something too. The Medicine employee complained to the suited thug. You think I'd let a little kid like that get away from me? Just relax, my boys will bring him back, and will scare him so bad he represses these memories, he said before transforming into a hyena and running after him, not noticing another tanuki behind the truck watching him in fury. Luckily, she didn't run out. She instead turned her attention to the employee. Hold on, I think I've seen that boy before, he gasped in a panic. Mikiru was now very suspicious of this man. He knew Izuku from somewhere, and was panicked about it upon remembering. Izuku's shoes collided quickly with the floor as he ran faster than ever before, probably due to adrenaline. Actually, due to him developing rabbit legs, which was letting him spring off the floor much quicker. He had the phone the mayor gave him and was dialing Shiru. Come on, mister. Qiru, please. Where are you? He whined as the phone continued to ring. Meanwhile, Qiru was at the site of the last bomb, it having been cleared. Unfortunately, he left his coat and phone in a car, and left it on silent, where he couldn't see Izuku's calls. In a room, 2 employees were searching through files until they found what they wanted. It's him. The footage of Izuku running off was played again, catching a frame where Izuku turned to look back, giving a clear view of his face. The second employee, a much wider man, was now sweating bullets. It is him. Unknown to them, they had someone else in the room. She had managed to sneak in unseen completely, literally. Miku copied camouflage and managed to be undetected in all her silent rage. She watched as they pulled up an image of Izuku when he was human. His cream-colored face, diamond-patterned freckles, green hair with a 5 o'clock shadow, wide eyes, all set into a look of fear in the photo of his mugshot in his school uniform. Miku struggled to not strangle these two to let out her anger. Izuku probably wouldn't be too happy if he found out she did that. But she couldn't just attack these guys either. She needed a good opportunity. Who knows how long her invisibility would last? Izuku cowered in fear against the wall. Kaken no. So, what were you doing back there, little guy? A bit far from mama, don't ya think? The hyena thug spoke. Izuku gulped before responding. IWW was H here WW with my sister TTH. Then IGG got lost, Izuku said, seemingly trying to press farther into the wall. Oh, well then kiddo, we can help you get back to your sister. But first, why don't you try and recall what you heard back there? The hyena thug demanded from the scared boy. Out of fear, he yanked his phone out of his hair and threw it hard enough for it to go flying past the hyena's face and take a few strands of hair with it. What a bad-mannered kid you are. Looks like someone needs to teach you some manners. He growled as the other thugs moved closer. Izuku felt his legs give out as he balled up against the floor. A clawed hand reached out for him, but before it even touched him, it was grabbed painfully and hoisted into the air. It was Mr. Qiru. Quit it, you're scaring him, he growled. 𝗬𝗓𝗏. The thugs started to freak out. 2 others tried to make a jump for him, but were easily batted out of the hall. Scram. I won't kill you. At least not today, Qiru ordered. The thugs were quick to pick up their friend and run off. Glad I made it in time. He looked over at the quiet, balled-up, crying tanuki with a look of horror etched into its face. He gently knelt down to Izuku. Hey. No response. Please. I'm sorry I didn't come sooner. A shift of his tail. Please, I don't want to see any beastmen like this. Miku would especially be worried. Izuku's eyes shifted to look at him. Mr. Qiru. Izuku whimpered out, slowly uncurling. I'm sorry I didn't get your calls sooner. Why were those guys after you? He apologized to the fun-sized tanuki. Qiru picked up Izuku, holding in a cry of joy when Izuku threw his head to lean on his chest. I saw something shady when we were loading since stuff Miku. Izuku suddenly shouted, remembering where he left his mo friend. Calm down. I'm sure Miku can handle herself if you distracted all the thugs. Those guys were part of a gang. They work with medicine to divert goods. Qiru explained. Izuku took in the information. Then an explosion rocked them, making Izuku let out a scream. Izuku's fear was overtaken by panic. The medicine just blew up. Miku was still there. Qiru quickly took off with Izuku in his arms. He looked down at the tanuki. I think you should get somewhere safer, he spoke. I see can't. Miku is still there. What if she's hurt? I left her behind. I can't do it again, he pleaded, having left Shiru's arms and was now keeping up with him. It's dangerous. I don't care. That's what being a hero is about. Facing danger in order to help those in need. That's what you are for Beastman, right? Even though she won't admit. She's a Beastman too right now. So, protect her and Izuku said firmly without stutter. Qiru looked at him. You're such a pain, he said before leading the way to the medicine. Although he wouldn't admit it, he was proud of Izuku. Izuku and Qiru looked inside a wrecked server room, full of various smoking objects and broken parts. Mikeru, he called into the room. He followed Qiru in as they stood next to the white employee, who was wiping sweat off his face, and the police chief. Ogami. This is Mr. Yaba, the medical center director. The chief introduced. He turned to face them, masking his surprise to see Izuku by covering his nose, as if the smell bothered him. This is the work of those bombers too. The police will pay for not preventing this. Yaba demanded. Izuku didn't know why, but this man seemed off. He didn't look like he was sweat from heat. He was nervous. It seemed to get worse once he and Mr. Qiru arrived. Could he? No, he shouldn't jump to conclusions. Qiru stepped forwards. Allow me to investigate as well, Qiru requested. The chief explained Qiru to Yaba getting permission to help, but Izuku never took his eyes off Yaba. Soon he left the room, leaving Qiru to look for sense. I traced the bomb fragments perfectly, so how did I miss this one? Izuku wondered the same. Unless it was scentless, then there was no reason for Qiru to have missed it unless its scent was masked. Or it was a recent explosion. Qiru stood up. Did you find something? Izuku asked. It was scentless. So there's the reason. When someone calls her baby boy a danger, Mimura, that boy is back, Yaba said to his colleague, panicked. Mimura looked back with an equal amount of panic before Yaba spoke again. We have no choice, he simply stated. Right, Mimura agreed. Suddenly the phone rang. They picked it up. On the other end was the chairman. I heard the medicine was bombed. What a frightful world, he simply stated, his voice remaining calm. He was a tall man with blonde comb-over hair, blue eyes, and a deep blue suit. Alan Sylvester. Why, yes, that's correct. The research center's data management department was bombed. But since the hospital's data was kept elsewhere, it's safe. Yaba informed quickly, his voice having a slight quiver to it. I see. That's good news. Repair the facility immediately. Spare no expense. Make sure there's no evidence of the terrible disaster. Not a single trace, Mr. Yaba. The chairman stated. Yes, sir. He replied, intimidated just by the man's voice. The line went dead. Unbelievable. So much trouble, Alan stated calmly. Yaba was hunched over his desk. Director Yaba. He raised himself from his position to look at the voice's source. There in the room was Izuku, Qiru, and the police chief. Can we speak to you? The chief said. What do you want now? I demand you take responsibility for this. Yaba replied violently, pointing accusingly at the guests. They all stepped forwards, and no one heard the steps coming closer to Yaba. We examined the site of the explosion, but couldn't pick up the culprit's scent. The chief informed. Are you making excuses? Yaba cried in outrage, trying to use it to mask his terrible job of not looking guilty. Not just the culprit. There's no scent at all at the scene for a while. That doesn't just happen. Scent doesn't just completely disappear. Not unless a chemical is used to get rid of all odors. Qiru stated firmly, taking another step closer to the scientist. Mr. Yaba, you're capable of developing a chemical like that at this research center, aren't you? The chief inquired. Don't be ridiculous. How dare you accuse me to hide your own incompetence? He argued. Izuku stepped forward. Earlier, in the lower levels, I caught on of your employees doing business with gangsters, talking about supplying something. They sounded like they had done things like that regularly. and we're only planning to stop now due to the recent bombings. From what I could see from his ID, he seemed pretty high up in this business and close to you. So there's a chance you could be involved too. Izuku spilled. You faked the bombings and blew up the research center to cover it up. Shiru added. Hold on. How can you trust what this guy and his kid says? Yaba questioned. Shiru's glare sharpened on the man. Then Shiru explained. When I trace the scent left at a crime scene, I always find the culprit. That's because all beastmen have a scent. It should be impossible for one to just not have a scent. Yet at the crime scene, there was a period where there was no scent at all. And there hasn't been a scent on your hands since the explosion. Yaba quickly went to smell his hands, quickly finding out that it was true. There was no smell to them whatsoever. He was caught. The police chief held up a document. In accordance with the regulations of the Beastman Special Zone, the analysis of the scent will be used as proof. He spoke to the scientist. He just gritted his teeth. Mr. Yaba, why don't you just give your story down at the station? The chief suggested with a beckoning motion. The doctor lowered his head, about to transform and attack, but then suddenly found himself in a chokehold, but no one had moved. Everyone in the room was just as confused at Yaba's current act, until he suddenly shifted into his beastman form, a rhino, and a yelp was heard. He roared, thrashing forwards at Shiru, trying to get an invisible assailant off his back and take out the wolf. Shiru caught his horn and stopped his advance. Mr. Shiru, Izuku said, panicked. He had moved closer to a wall to avoid the attack, but was worried about Shiru. Just then, a green tail snaked itself around his throat. He couldn't breathe. Help. Not again. Don't move. If you do, I'll strangle this kid. Mimura said in his beastman form, an iguana. He was holding Izuku off his feet, clearly unaware that he was already cutting off the boy's air, also unaware of a furious figure charging toward him. Shiru growled at the situation, then getting punched by Yaba, getting smacked into the wall. At the same time, Mimura had been slammed into the wall with hands around his neck, starting to become visible and revealing brown fur. Mimura, what are you doing? Run. Yaba called to his colleague. The iguana struggled to pry the hands off after a second whole tanuki had revealed herself after turning herself invisible somehow. He distracted her by slamming Izuku face first into the ground, which caused her take her attention off of him and try to get to Izuku. He pulled Izuku away quickly, dragging the small boy out the hall as he gasped for with a bloody nose, an enraged tanuki hot on his tail. Yaba leapt from a window to make his escape. As soon as Shiru recovered, he was quick to do the same after telling the police chief to go after the tanuki. Yaba looked up to see Shiru rocketing down towards him. He raised his horn to try and skewer him, but Shiru stopped his plummet by grabbing a hold of the horn. Your claws are no match for my skin, Yaba yelled at Shiru, trying to deter him. It didn't work. You faked a disaster to save your own skin. My bare hands are enough for a coward like you, Shiru said, clearly intimidating the man. He reeled an arm back, proceeding to deliver a nasty blow to the side of the rhino's face. Shiru then lifted him by his horn. A beastman who has abandoned his pride isn't worthy of this horn, he yelled, his grip starting to crack the horn. Wait, please, no, don't, Yaba cried as his horn cracked more and more. Soon, Shiru had broken it off from its base, letting Yaba fall back against the bridge between two building sections. On the roof, Mikiru was going fucking ballistic. She was taking wild swings at Mimura, who still had Izuku captive, and had luckily moved his tail under the boy's arms, which kept him from dying. Mimura was already sporting massive cuts. He wasn't built for fighting, and he was distracted by the fact that the two tanuki were here. From a distance, the police chief were shouting at them, mostly Mikiru, to calm down. Guns trained on Mimura, however, but unwilling to fire due to Izuku. Give me back my damn ba. She stopped in her tracks upon seeing where Mimura had moved. he was holding a dazed, barely conscious Izuku over the edge of the building. "No one move," he commanded, threatening to drop Izuku. Mikiru could only stand frozen, unable to act. "Let the boy go. If anyone moves an inch, especially her," he pointed to Mikiru, "then I'll drop him." Izuku, through his wooziness, was scared. This is why he didn't like being picked up by strangers. They always dropped him. They always threw him. He needed to escape. "You'll never live if you do this, you bastard." Mikiru threatened the iguana, unaware of how feral and wolf-like she looked right now. Mimura growled and yelled at both of them, looking between Mikiru and Izuku. "It's all because of you two. It's your faults. If it hadn't been for you two, we would never have had all this trouble. Especially you, ya feral bitch." He said the last part, pointing right at Mikiru. "Put him down and I'll show you fucking feral. If you don't want him to die, you'll get her to back off. And get me 100 million yen and a helicopter for my escape." Mikiru growled as she backed away, not wanting to get Izuku killed. "We can get the girl away from you, but don't be ridiculous," the police chief spoke. A small black crow flew up from behind them. It tried to take a dive at Mimura, only to be swatted away when the iguana saw it coming. "Don't try and get past a chameleon's blind spot. If you try anything else, I'll kill him. Get the money and the helicopter," he demanded, moving his tail back to Izuku's throat and squeezing, snapping the boy into reality. "He's going to kill me, he's going to kill me, he's going to kill me. I don't want to die." His arms began sparkling with an orange-yellow light and suddenly extended themselves to latch around the iguana's neck. He dropped the boy out of shock and Izuku lost his grip, still dazed from a lack of oxygen. Izuku felt himself starting to fall, his head feeling too fuzzy to scream, but he was still scared. "Izuku!" He looked where his feet was, and diving for him was Mikiru. A small smile crossed his face as he tried to reach out. Mikiru grabbed a hold of him, clutching him tight in her arms. Mikiru quickly realized a lapse in her planning, but then they were both pulled into the arms of Shiru. Izuku liked this hug, but they were all going to die at this rate. He concentrated. He needed his tail to expand, to protect all of them. As the ground rushed to meet them, Izuku's tail puffed out and encompassed the three of them. Tumbling down the side of the building, smashing onto a window, then finally landing on the ground level with a crater formed. Laying in it once the ball of fluff receded was Izuku on top of Mikiru, who was on top of Shiru. Is everyone okay?" Izuku asked. "We're alive. Please get off me," Shiru said under the two of the. They quickly scrambled off. He shook his head, clearing it from the sudden rolling. "Ogami, don't let the little one move around too much. He should get checked for injuries at the medicine," the chief called out to them. Izuku's nose gushed out blood on cue. Maybe I should," Izuku said, whimpering in pain as he clutched his nose. He should be fine," Shiru said as he got himself back on his feet, stretching, and then picking up Izuku. Shiru, I think Izuku may seriously need a doctor for his nose," Mikiru input, now following Shiru as he walked off. "He'll be fine in a bit," Shiru reaffirmed. IIW was strangled and 𝐔𝐬𝐝 slammed face first eye into the G ground. Could have a C concussion. "Oh, or worse," Izuku whined. Yaba and Mimura confessed. They conspired to embezzle. They realized that the executives had noticed, so they blew up Medicen's database. They hired criminals to play the part of bombers and planned to destroy evidence of their embezzlement. Rose reported to Shiru as he sat on his couch with Izuku's head resting on his lap. Unsurprisingly, he did bust his nose and did get off with only a concussion, so he was taking things easy and resting, with Shiru helping. Because it was his fault, he didn't see a doctor right away. Mr. Chopper was so nice. "Was that all? Everyone is okay, right?" Izuku asked from his position. "What do you mean?" Rose asked the boy. It seemed like the malice of that 𝗵𝗲𝗄 person was more intense than that, mostly toward me and Mikiru. Why would they have blown up their whole research center to protect themselves? I'm having trouble understand why people do things like that just to cover things up. Izuku tried to sit himself up, but stopped when his head started hurting and Shiryu forced him back down. I forgot to say this earlier, but thank you, Izuku. Even though the drop wouldn't have killed me, and that's how I was planning on saving you and Mikiru, thanks. I also won't lock you two up again. Izuku's head whipped up so fast due to Shiryu's words that it gave him some intense pain that almost made him feel like fainting, so he laid back down. B, but why you were so serious about it before, Izuku wondered. It makes me think about what those two scum did. I don't want to be comparable to them, Shiryu stated to the boy, gently rubbing his head. But don't think you can tell people about the 𝗵𝘃𝗻𝗄 disease, Shiryu quickly said. Izuku had no intention of doing so, but nodded the best he could. Mr. Midoriya, I'll look into finding a cure for you and Mikiru. Izuku hummed at Mayor Rosa's words. She's a leading 𝗵𝘃𝗻𝗄 genetic researcher. She's the first 𝗵𝘃𝗻𝗄 to get a doctorate degree. Whoa, he said as he started to raise his head again, but quickly lowered it. I'm a politician now, though. My research is also what brought me and 𝗧𝗵𝗲 together. It's how we got their support of the establishment of Anima City. Rose informed, further finding herself to enjoy impressing the boy, who was somehow making notes while lying down, having finished a page on Mayor Rose. Be careful with 𝗧𝗵𝗲. They're pretty fishy, Shiryu inputted. Izuku gave him a questioning look. I don't have any reason if that's what you're wondering. My nose just says so. Izuku decided to be the one to tease for the first time in his life. You mean your feral instincts? Izuku snarked, earning him being held upright as Shiryu stood up, causing him immense pain for 2 seconds before being cradled by him. That fits the way Mikiru was. Izuku couldn't help but agree. Later, Mikiru waited outside the shower as Izuku took his first. Somehow this managed to become habit-eye. Their short time here. But if there's one thing Mikiru has never done, it was peek on Izuku, and Izuku has never peeked on her. But her reasons for peeking aren't anything indecent. It's because she can see the reason for Izuku's choice in clothes. His legs, that were usually covered in baggy jeans, had scars reminiscent of long cuts, definitely caused by a quirk, and smaller bursts where the skin seemed burned, the areas that infuriated her the most because of how much of them were in abundance. The burn scars seemed to outnumber all the others, usually on his chest and back, occasionally on other places, but much fainter. She needed that sandbag Shiryu gave her again. Mikiru, your turn. Hand me my towel, please. She liked that Izuku almost never seemed to stutter when alone with her.